The blue-green glacial waters of the Kenai River run swiftly through the heart of Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. The power and beauty of the river are complemented by an abundance of several species of salmon. Among them, the unique Kenai King, one of the largest in the world. Every summer, anglers from Alaska and points throughout the world converge on the river, especially when Kenai Kings run.
The biggest king salmon in the world run right here, and we have a chance to get them.
If a guy gets 180, somebody's going to have 180 too. First liar don't stand a chance.
It's the first one I ever caught.
Give me an F.
F.
Give me an I.
I.
Give me an S.
S.
Give me an H.
Big fish! Ow! Ow!
Last words from the wife was, don't come home without a fish.
You caught very many fish?
Haven't caught any.
What do you like most about coming out here?
The scenery is delightful, even if I don't catch something. Then also I don't have to clean it.
In addition to the prized salmon, the river contains some of the most valuable real estate in Alaska. It's not an exaggeration to say that the Kenai is the most famous sport fishing river in Alaska, renowned for its beauty, recreational opportunities, and its fish. Because the Kenai is readily accessible by road from Anchorage, Alaska's largest city, it is the most used river in Alaska. The communities near the river grow to many times their normal populations during the summer, with more than 100,000 sport fishermen trying their luck here every year. There is a high demand for recreational lots, camper parking, and boat docks. The result has been uncontrolled waterfront development. Riverbank construction threatens fragile salmon habitat, and boat traffic on the river creates potential public safety problems. There are few rules of conduct on and off the river and little enforcement. What is happening to the Kenai is nothing short of a crisis. It is a complicated crisis, and much is at stake, including the future of the giant Kenai Kings. The conflict between sport fishing groups and commercial fishermen is this. Commercial fishermen are primarily interested in catching sockeye salmon. The sport fishermen want the king salmon. But sockeye and king salmon mix in Cook Inlet before they school and enter the Kenai River. As a result, the set net fishermen near the Kenai cannot help but catch some of the king salmon in their nets. It is this incidental catch that makes sport fishermen fighting mad.
The only ones we find fault with is the east side set netters, which those 94 fishing sites last year took almost 70% of the total catch of all king salmon, including the 180-some thousand man days of sport fishing. Sport fishing took approximately 9,500, and the incidental catch you're talking about was over 14,000. That's what's not right. That's what we want to see changed.
Well, the commercial catch of king salmon certainly is going to affect the overall run, but I don't think it's necessarily going to affect it to its detriment. There will be less kings available in the river, and obviously less kings available for sport harvest. But the overall management of the king salmon run doesn't change because of that commercial catch.
The fish and game primarily are commercially oriented and have been for 50 years here. And that's what's got to change. It's got to turn around and change. I've lived here for 33 years, and 33 years ago there wasn't even a road down to the Kenai. But that's all changed. And you've seen an increase in population, and it's going to have to turn around to where the fishery is primarily managed for recreational fishery and for commercial fishing second, instead of the way it is now.
The river's flowing about 6 to 8 miles an hour right now. When it comes up to its regular stage, the water does, it moves up to about 8 to 10 miles an hour. It's a pretty swift river. One reason for your life jackets, and another is the number of boats on the river too, in case something should happen. The temperature of the water is about 34, 36 degrees, so it's a little chilly. The largest king ever taken in the Kenai River was 89 pounds. It was taken 5 years ago now by a kid that weighed 82 pounds. So I've got a lot of confidence in some of you people this morning.
Harry Gaines has been a sport fishing guide on the river for the past 13 years.
We're going in. Bring your tip around towards me. Run, let him run. Keep it. Yeah.
All right.
Bring him into the net. Woo! We got him.
Congratulations there, a little slime, huh?
During the past few years, the business of sport fish guiding has spawned a multi-million-dollar industry that includes hundreds of guides. Some sport fishermen complain there are too many of them. With the guides' clients taking 60% of the fish, yet representing only a quarter of all sport fishermen on the river, new regulations had to be adopted.
Last year and this year we've approved changing the annual limit from 5 to 2 fish, which is a significant change. We've concurred and agreed no boats fishing on the river on Monday. Guides can't fish at all on Sundays anymore. The guides are changed from fishing all the time from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. only. We've put a lot of major items against ourselves to help protect the resource.
Right now there's over 200 guides on the Kenai River, and that has come on since 1980 whenever the Coast Guard decided to come down and enforce the license which is required in navigable waters. And everyone thought, of course, it was going to be limited entry, so they all came out and become a guide. I think that what we need is the state legislature to adopt a guide board, and from that guide board we can make our profession more professionalism, or give it more professionalism, and set up some real restrictions that will assist in making our career a more professional type of career.
I don't think that the person who doesn't know the river, doesn't know guiding, should be allowed to have a guiding license. I've had guides time after time come over to our camp right here and ask how to tie up leaders. And then they turn around and charge a guy $100 for a 4-hour fishing trip. It's got to go.
And we don't like being linked with the guides, as Bob Penny, he links all of us sport fishermen with the guides, and we're on opposite fate. The guides should be linked with commercial fishing. They are commercial.
Long before the Kenai River became the sport fisherman's paradise, commercial fishing was a big industry in this area. It is the second largest industry on the Kenai Peninsula today and accounts for a sizable portion of the local economy. But the concern over the salmon and who should get to catch them is not nearly as great as the concern for the survival of the salmon as a resource. Managing a resource in as competitive an environment as this is difficult at best. Fisheries biologists try through various scientific methods to monitor the strength of the annual salmon run in the Kenai. They tag fish in an effort to track them to spawning grounds. And they use sonar to count the number of fish passing by. All this is designed to ensure that enough salmon return to the river each year to perpetuate the salmon runs, all to satisfy commercial and sport fishermen. Paul Roosh is one of the managers.
Well, I think right now we have the ability to count the escapement on sockeyes, and our management of sockeyes is fairly precise, and we're on the right track. The escapement of king salmon in the Kenai at this point is not measurable. It's evaluated strictly from the strength of the catches in the commercial fishery, the east side set net catches, and also from the in-river sport fishing catch rates. But we do not at this point possess a means to totally evaluate in terms of hard numbers what the escapement is.
It's a dangerous thing we're looking at now. We don't know what the escapement is because of the glacial nature of the stream. We don't know how many fish are spawning, and for that reason, I can't answer that. But I'm scared, just plain scared.
The very thing that would do the most to improve the resource is fish enhancement, the type of thing that the commercial fishermen are now doing through our aquaculture associations and our assessing of ourselves of a fish tax. The sport fishing leadership won't even talk about that. They want nothing to do with that. They think a hatchery fish is an inferior fish, for example.
People who are really avid sport fishermen tend to like to catch wild fish. The difference can best be described as the difference between hunting a wild animal or catching a wild animal versus going out and catching a cow. There's something very different aesthetically when you know that that fish came out of a hatchery, out of a screen where a bunch of eggs were hatched and was put in the water by human beings. We like to know that these fish are wild and that they'll forever be that way.
We were starting to bring a fish back. If you're going to take a fish, we should return a fish. And if you take that policy, then we'll always have fish.
Fish hatchery program makes a lot of sense when the runs are depleted, but normally a fish hatchery, as experience has been in the Northwest, which has pretty much lost all their runs, that the fish hatchery compete with the wild fish, and the wild fish tend to be the one that loses out in the scene or are gone from then on.
The Department of Fish and Game began a hatchery program for king salmon in the nearby Kasilov River 9 years ago. For the past 3 years, 6,000 to 8,000 fish have been returning to the river for sport fishermen to catch. But representatives of sport fishermen's groups feel that there are other, better alternatives for the Kenai.
I'd like to see a way to sort out the king salmon from the sockeye so that the commercial fishermen can get their livelihood the way they want to and not doing it at the expense of the king salmon. And I think there is a way. Maybe it's a weir, maybe it's some other physical method, maybe it's something that the biologists have not come up with yet. But I think there is a way, and I think there's going to have to be a way.
A lot of smart people have given a lot of thought to trying to separate out the king salmon catch from the sockeye fishery, and there haven't been any magic solutions to this point. I'm not sure if there are going to be any. The Board of Fisheries has chosen to go at it through season restrictions and give up some sockeye catch to reduce the king catch.
So, the salmon become a political football that is bounding out of control. One of the means the state of Alaska utilizes to set policy regarding fisheries harvest is through the 7-member Board of Fisheries. The purpose of the board is to listen to both the Department of Fish and Game managers and commercial, subsistence, and sport fisheries groups. Then it must adopt regulations that provide for conservation of the resource and also answer the needs of user groups. Some think that job isn't being done.
In the case of sports and commercial, you have two groups of people who are very passionately believe in their positions. The bottom line, what they're really saying, what the sports people are really saying, is that there are more of us than there are of you. Therefore, we have political power.
The Board of Fish is a little bit different story. It's gradually became more politically and more political. This year, the board was threatened that unless they cut back the season on the area of the Kasilov south to Nanilchik to the 2nd of July, and the area north of Midway up Kalafonsky Beach to the 9th of July, they would not be confirmed. When the legislature gets that powerful and is looking at political management only and not biological, the whole resource is in trouble. In a few years, if the trend keeps up as it's going today, there will be no resource for anyone to argue or fight over, and there will be no need of a board of fish.
Vlade Edelman has been involved in commercial fisheries since the 1930s. Today, she owns and runs a processing plant in Kenai, and her grandson Dwayne operates their commercial set net site on the east beach of Cook Inlet.
When I first started fishing here on the beach side, as far back as I can remember, we fished around the clock 7 days a week, and then our time was shortened up to fishing 3 days a week. Then it was shortened up to fishing 2 days a week.
The cutbacks lately hasn't been brought on, any biological reason. I figure it's a political reason more than anything else, and this last cutback has really hurt us. It hasn't proven that we're going to save any king salmon or anything else. I'd just like to see the political get out of it and go back to a biological management of the fisheries, and that's why I think we need to get a set of guidelines on the Board of Fisheries so they do go back to biologically managing the fish and not manage them for people or any certain user group.
July 23, 1984 was a controversial day on the Kenai River. Commercial fishing had been closed because the Alaska Department of Fish and Game said the numbers of salmon escaping into the river was too small, but sport fishing was allowed to continue. The commercial fishermen mounted a protest.
Remember now, this river is our river too. Yeah. It's not just sports fishermen's river. We have an investment in this river as far as these fish are concerned too.
We have been shut down now for a little over a week to red salmon fishing to get escapement, and it's needed. We need to get the fish in the river. Now look right there, fellas. See him going down the river. At any rate, we feel that if we need these reds in the river, we better all be quiet and not fish until we get them. We need these fish for 5 years from now, so let's not be catching them. Every fish can spawn, and let's let them do it. I think the management would shut it down if a word from upstairs hadn't stopped them.
They also knew that Governor Sheffield was on the river fishing.
This is called subsistence. I can feed the legislators with this, you know.
We're closed fishing, and the governor's down here sport fishing on the river with a guide. We kind of wonder why that is.
How are your hotels? Huh? Okay, what's it say there anyway?
We can't fish commercially. Why are they sports fishermen?
Why are you down here supporting the sports fishermen? Yeah. Well, I think I've been supporting the commercial fishermen too. No, we haven't seen it. You haven't seen it?
We haven't even got to fish. We stay here all winter. This is our livelihood, you know.
We're from this area. The sports fishermen are from everywhere else. Yeah, I think we've done a pretty good job of supporting the commercial fishermen this year and every other year.
We haven't even got to fish yet. The rent's going by out there.
Management's been gonna strictly political.
What else do you have to say?
Now, is that it? How many did you guys catch this morning, Bill? Where are you going? The problem's over here.
Okay, we're back on Sound Off. My guest today is Governor Bill Sheffield, and he is here. And Governor, you had quite a greeting out there this morning, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Well, I do have.
The problem really is that this is a very popular grounds for a lot of people to come and fish, and the river is overcrowded and overloaded, and it's a good river. And
Later that day, the governor met with local commercial fishermen to hear their concerns.
This state is too large not to spread the people out. We need a road system into the Sitna system. We need roads into other areas where some of these sportsmen can go other than the Kenai Peninsula. It is ludicrous to think that the Kenai Peninsula can perform and act as a recreation center for the state of Alaska.
What we are talking about here, Governor, is not a nice play trip. What we're talking about here is livelihood for residents of this Kenai Peninsula who have children, many children, to go to school. It's not to build anything fancy or to build a fine car, it's their livelihood.
2 days after this meeting, sport fishing on the Kenai was stopped by the Department of Fish and Game. Whether this decision was based on politics or biology is unknown, but the commercial fishermen had made their point.
The only argument you can have from the east side settlers is that of one of economics. It's one of commercial income, of money generated. And we don't argue with that. That's the only argument they have. And I think you're going to find that this economic survey we're having done now will show what a tremendous impact sport fishing has on this community, on the people that live here, on the airlines, on transportation. We're going to see more dollar impact from the sport fishery.
The fishermen are the mainstay, or one of the mainstays of the economy in the 9 months when the commercial season is shut down and the sports fishermen aren't here. And if you ask the businessmen in these communities what happens when the fishermen have a bad year, he'll tell you. And if we don't go fishing before long, they're going to have a bad year just like the fishermen are. And it hurts the businessmen all over the community.
This motorhome right here that came from New Hampshire, he figures this, he runs about $4,000 a piece for his 2 fish. $1,000 for each one of these 150 motorhomes, $1,000 a year to put your motorhome here. Boats. These fast food joints uptown, the big Safeways, and they're not being built because of the commercial fisheries. They're being built because of the impact of the sport fisheries. The commercial fisheries have been here all the time, and they haven't built the fast food joints. But right now, this river is being flooded by tourists, and that's what supports it.
There aren't enough facilities to handle the number of people that would like to use the river. Many, if you go up and down the river areas, you find trailers parked in all kinds of places, people trying to get to the river, and the campers and so forth. It's really a problem. Of course, the problem is the numbers of people that are coming down now compared to what there were, say, 4 or 5 years ago. We have thought of dynamiting the road between here and Anchorage, but nobody's been willing to do it yet.
on, trying to catch those salmon before they make that river run. On the river there's sport fishers standing by, just trying to get those fish before they die. Strange as it seems, these two groups can't get along, each claiming rights to the fish who's right and wrong. But the real trouble in these two fisheries is they can't fish as often as they please. But to understand the Kenai, you would have to be older. Sport fishermen are fishing shoulder to shoulder, while out in the inlet on the ocean and the shore, they're laying nets for salmon like they've never laid before. I'm a king salmon silver, I'm a red, and even if I make it up that river, well, I know I'm good as dead. And it's a dangerous situation indeed. That's how the Kenai River run looks to me.
Riverfront property continues to be much in demand along the Kenai. Despite high prices and helter-skelter development, there are groups trying to set an example for others to follow. Andy Johnson is president of Salamatov Native Corporation, which has spent 3 years planning a residential subdivision, which he says will have minimal impact on the river.
In the developing process on the river, we decided several things. One, that we wanted to keep it in its natural state as near as possible. We wanted to develop lots that were large, where people had privacy, where they had restrictions to where they couldn't pile a bunch of junk in, and where they still had access to the river and could do the things that the river's useful for.
But unrestricted development along the riverbank, combined with heavy boat traffic and the number of people on the river, all threaten fragile salmon habitat.
There are no river systems in the country that I know of, other than in Alaska and particularly on the Kenai, where an intense sport fishery is allowed to occur right on the salmon spawning beds, right on the spawning beds. And I don't know if you've ever put yourself in the position of being a female king salmon, but I would be interested in knowing if I mean, do you think that you could spawn with 300 jet motors a day going across your head?
It does no good to manage a stock if its habitat is, consistently being degraded, and that is just as important as adequate management is protecting the habitat in the river.
To protect the salmon habitat, the state of Alaska and the Kenai Peninsula Borough passed new laws designating the Kenai River as a special management area. The regulations call for a local advisory board to help manage the river. Neil Johansson helped draft the plan.
I would say that development along the river is going to see some stricter controls than it has had in the past. An awful lot of that is going to be dependent upon the activities of the Kenai Peninsula Borough. I would say that the small lot recreational subdivision, essentially the camper lots which have come into existence in the last few years, are probably going to be brought under some kind of control. Certain stretches of the river will be closed to power boats. I think that there's room in the river for more drift fishing, areas where people don't have to compete with the putt-putt, bang-bang recreation activities on the river.
Even with more controls and regulation on use and development of the Kenai River, the continuing battle between sport and commercial fishermen will have to be resolved. Some think a solution will eventually be reached.
As far as future decisions about the Kenai River and what happens to the fisheries and the sport fishing conflict and so on, yes, there's no question about it that politics will always be very important, if not the most important thing. But the thing we have to remember is that there's nothing dirty about the word politics. That just means people acting through majority decision. And as long as you have an enlightened population, so far the population of the state of Alaska is very favorable to commercial fishing. It thinks highly of it, as they do of sport fishing. And I think that I'm not giving up on the process. I think there's a good chance that an amicable solution will result through people just making just decisions.
If it comes to legislative action, the sportsmen outnumber the commercial fishermen 10 to 1. And legislative action could close this inlet to commercial fishing. I don't want to see that happen. We have a board of fisheries, we have compromise, which we've been doing. And that's why I say I'm a friend of the commercial fishermen. I don't want to see them put out of business. They're friends of mine. They're people I've known for 20 years.
And hopefully with that kind of diversity of opinion, we can reach a plan which may not make everybody happy, but at the same time will protect the river so that its health, its viability, its value for recreation as well as commercial interests is just as good 50 years from now as it is now.
The controversy which erupts on the Kenai River every year is really about the problems created by a growing number of users competing for a limited resource. The number of salmon available for harvest by sport, commercial, and subsistence fishermen is increasing. But Alaska's population explosion and surging economic growth challenges the state's ability to restrain groups who vie for political control of the Kenai salmon. Successful management of the river and its fishery will depend on how well interest groups can coexist to allow proper management for the time when Kenai Kings run. In retrospect, Alaskans should also not forget how the major salmon runs were lost in the Pacific Northwest. It is history that their loss was due to the effects of massive dam projects, timber operations, and other industry. From that lesson, and with more foresight, Alaska's salmon can be spared a similar destiny.
I'm a king salmon, silver, I'm a red. And even if I make it up that river, well, I know I'm good as dead. And it's a dangerous situation indeed. That's how the Kenai River run looks to me. That's how the Kenai River run looks to me. Trying to catch those salmon before they make that river run. On the river there's sport fishers standing by, just trying to get those fish before they die. Strange as it seems, these two groups can't get along, each claiming rights to the fish who's right and wrong. But the real trouble in these two fisheries is they can't fish as often as they please. But to understand the Kenai, you would have to be older. Sport fishermen are fishing shoulder to shoulder, while out in the inlet on the ocean and the shore, they're laying nets for salmon like they've never laid before. I'm a king salmon, silver, I'm a red. And even if I make it up that river, well, I know I'm good as dead. And it's a dangerous situation indeed. That's how the Kenai River run looks to me.